Hello and welcome to the Dinosaw number 224, another 7 curious, interesting things I saw last week. So as ever, let's crack on. First one, we have some drone swarm news. This is very exciting. This is coming out of Shanghai, and they've got some drones to swarm using their own inbuilt neural networks. Now it's quite exciting. You put a very small sensor onto the drone, you put essentially a Raspberry Pi, tiny little $21 chip on there, and it can run its own processing using a little vision sensor. So it uses a neural network, figures out what it's got to do, and can send the controls directly to the drone controls essentially. So it's very similar to how a fly works. So it just sort of senses it really quickly and just goes in a certain direction. So as you can see, it can obviously navigate these really interesting areas. I love this little thing that they put together. I think that's amazing. But yeah, so this is probably how you're going to die in the future. These are going to search you out, come through your house, and probably kill you. There you go. This is Meta, this is their Reality Labs, and it is showing you this really interesting device. It doesn't have to be attached to a wrist, but it just so happens is. And what it does is it looks at your surface electrotomography. So what that really means is it's all the little senses or the muscle electric in your wrist in this case, and it can turn that into very high fidelity signals. And what that will allow you to do, for instance, you can then sort of move your wrist a little bit left and right. Now this is great if you have lack of mobility. You can then start controlling things like computer games or vehicles. But likewise, you know, you don't need the smart ring or any of that sort of stuff. It can actually sense it with high fidelity through your wrist. And as I say, it could go onto your arms or legs, or it could go anywhere. But as you're seeing here, actually just writing on a piece of paper or pretending to write on a piece of paper, it can turn that back into letters, which I find absolutely amazing. So this is pretty cool. So well done, Meta, for that. I do approve. One of the things I do approve of Meta. This is the Volonaut, and this came out in April, and they had this really glossy video that was sort of swishing around and looked really interesting, but it didn't really tell you how it worked. This is the slightly more honest version of it, which is really interesting, and I'll just be quiet so you can just hear. Now clearly, as suspected, plus the dust underneath it, it does use little jets, therefore it's probably not going to be up in the air for too long, but this thing will do 124 miles an hour apparently. That's its top speed, and that's 200 kilometers in old money, new money. But it looks super cool. So there you go. Have a look at Volonaut. I've got quite an interesting website and quite an interesting promise. This is an extension of how to make computer games of the future. This is Tencent, and they have the Hunyuan Gamecraft model. So this is part of actually their Hunyuan Tencent's kind of video generation model, and it's the next step. So what it does is it starts with a frame. And it could be a frame of a car game or a horse walking through some forest, for instance. It starts with that, and it then takes your input. And if you say, I'd like to go left, it then generates what it thinks is to your left. If you then, at the end of that, it then takes another screenshot and then generates the next piece of video, and so on and so forth. And it has this really interesting way of maintaining the history and the style of your clip. So each of these clips is not actually a game being played. It is literally just creating the video in front of the video of the video of the video. So given some essentially text scripting or crafting, you write out what your game should be, and then it will render it for you, which I think is really interesting. So there you go. We're seeing more and more of these, but this is just if Tencent doing it, you know it's going to hit pretty hard pretty soon. This is a new humanoid robot, released. The S2 is the industrial version, and it can hot swap its own batteries. That basically means that when it runs out of power, it runs up to one of these little battery units. It can then take out its own battery, which you're seeing happen right now, looking completely natural, obviously, nothing weird about that at all. It then puts the battery into the charge unit, takes out a new battery, and off it goes. So it takes about 3 minutes to swap its own battery, and therefore means it can then work 24/7 essentially, because each one of those batteries lasts for about 2 hours, and that's if it's walking about sort of chasing you and trying to kill you. If it's, for instance, standing still doing something and moving around with its arms, then it can actually last for 4 hours. So there you go. So I don't know how long the batteries take to charge, so in the future, if you need to take down the robots, just kick over the recharging stand. There you go. This is really interesting use of drones. Just a picture. This is off Reddit. I don't know who to credit this with, so if you took this picture, Thank you. That's amazing. And this is the Osaka Expo in Osaka in Japan, obviously. And it's just really interesting use of drones. So this is the exit, and obviously you go that way or that way, and that's amazing. As I say in the text, obviously to somebody on the other side, it's going to say Tixi, but I'm sure people are smart enough to figure that out. But likewise, I think it'd be really interesting, obviously, if, for instance, one of the exits is getting full or the car park is empty over here, the drones can then move and they can tell you that. So I think it's really interesting. I trained in signage, for instance. So this is the natural evolution of signage. It can just buzz around and change as it needs to be, but it's visible to everybody. I kind of like that. And finally, we have a really interesting hack. If you have a MacBook, then I don't know whether this works with other things, but there is no application. Chris Krosh, which I think is a great name, hope that's a real name, figured out that the touchpad can actually be used as some weighing scales. So it does require a finger to be on the pad because it needs to detect capacitance. But other than that, you download the app, you can get it from GitHub, for instance, you can install it, and you just put something on your trackpad and you can measure its weight, which I think is amazing. So great hack there. Don't know when you'll use that, but maybe useful for postage, for instance. So if you work at the post office and you want something interesting, get in touch with Chris Krosh, because that's a great thing. Okay, cool. Hopefully that was interesting. Hopefully it was useful. If it was, give it a like. I will see you next week.